There's a strange irony in nearly losing your life while crossing the street to buy sheet music. On that rainy Monday, May 30th, I was heading to Johnson's Music Shop on Fifth Avenue, rushing against the downpour with Chopin's Ballad No. 1 on my mind. The upcoming recital at Carnegie Hall, my first major performance since moving to New York, had consumed my thoughts for weeks. Perhaps that's why I didn't notice the taxi speeding through the red light. I remember the screech of tires on wet asphalt, the driver's panicked face, the strange weightlessness as I was thrown into the air. Then, nothing. The doctors told me later that my heart had stopped for nearly 4 minutes. 4 minutes during which the paramedics worked frantically to revive me on the glistening pavement as rain mixed with blood. 4 minutes that changed everything I thought I knew about life and what might come after. What happened in those 4 minutes has taken me months to process. Even now, as I sit at my piano, my fingers hovering over the keys I've played since childhood, I struggle to find the right notes, the right words, to explain what I experienced. Some might call it a hallucination, a trick of a dying brain starved of oxygen. But I have always thought this experience was not a dream. I also did not share the experience with anyone for a very long time. There was a long processing time for me to think about what I'd seen. How could I explain something so profound, so beyond our everyday reality, without sounding delusional? I'm a pianist, not a poet. My language is in the press of ivory keys and the vibration of strings, not in describing the indescribable, but now I feel ready to try. After the impact, I remember nothing of the ambulance ride or the frantic work of the paramedics. My next awareness came not in the hospital, but somewhere else entirely. I was floating in what seemed to be space. There were stars or small lights all around me. Some lights seemed larger than others and closer than other lights. The darkness wasn't frightening. It felt like the comfortable darkness of a concert hall just before the stage lights come up, full of anticipation rather than fear. I accelerated fast toward one of the lights. It wasn't a conscious decision to move. I simply found myself drawn to it, as if gravity itself had changed its rules. As I got closer to the light, it grew large enough for me to enter. I went in, head first, like squeezing through a tube. The light was so warm and inviting. It wasn't the heat kind of warm. It was the warmth of coming home after a long journey, of being embraced by someone who loves you without condition. The warmth of perfect acceptance. I was halfway into this vastly lit place when the tube closed around me at the waist. I wanted to go all the way in, but could not get completely into the space I was half in and half outside of the vast, light, warm, amazing, and loving space. There was a sense that my time had not yet come, that I was being held at the threshold. Within this luminescent world, I saw a sea of lights. The source of the lights came from far off to my left. I wanted to see the source of the light, but it was apparent to me somehow that I would not be able to do that. Something told me that seeing the source directly wasn't permitted. Not yet. I focused on the individual lights themselves and somehow knew they were all people. I could not make out features of all of their faces, but recognized them as being like me. They were beautiful, individual beings with a connected, common piece. It reminded me of an orchestra, distinct instruments creating a unified harmony. Then close to me, I saw Kip. Kip and I worked at the same church, but our paths rarely crossed. I played piano for the Sunday services and some special events. He coordinated the youth ministry. I can't even say we were friends. I knew of him, but did not really know him. He was just someone I would nod hello to in passing, someone whose enthusiasm for his work I admired from a distance. Yet there he was. His facial features and body were brightly lit. There were misty, soft edges to him, but it was definitely him. He was just like the other lighted beings in the space. He gave me a perspective of how they all were connected. I can see it in my mind still now. It was so much better than I can write about. Kip looked right at me. He saw me and recognized me. His facial expressions were everything, all at once. In his expression, I saw awe, wonder, peace, excitement, joy, love, and expectation. I felt everything that I saw on his face I experienced, what he was experiencing. At the moment he experienced it. It was like striking a perfect chord, every note distinct yet creating something more beautiful together than any could alone. As a pianist, I've spent my life pursuing those moments of harmonic perfection. What I felt through Kip made even the most transcendent musical experience seem like a child plinking random keys. The only difference was that I was stuck in the small tube, although I could not see the source of the light like Kip could. He looked at me and then looked back towards the light and then back at me. He didn't say anything, but I knew he was in glory. I could not express how happy he was or the joy he felt. I don't remember leaving that place. There was no gradual fade or transition. One moment I was there, experiencing that indescribable connection, and the next I was aware of the antiseptic smell of the hospital, the beeping of machines, and the worst headache of my life. The doctors were amazed by my recovery. 3 broken ribs, a fractured femur, a concussion, and numerous contusions. Serious injuries, but nothing that wouldn't heal. "You're lucky," they kept saying. I didn't feel lucky. I felt torn away from something precious, something real. When I returned to work after several weeks of recovery, another co-worker told me something that shook me to my core. Kip had died Monday while climbing a mountain in Colorado. The same Monday, the same day as my accident. Before the coworker told me he died, I was dumbfounded. Until then, I was treating the experience as a dream. Yet, it was so much more than a dream. I experienced emotional shock for a few days after learning about the tragedy. Then I had months and months of quiet processing time. During my physical recovery, I had to step away from performing. My fractured femur meant I couldn't use the pedals properly, and the pain in my ribs made sitting at the piano for extended periods impossible. But in that forced silence, away from the constant practice that had defined my life since childhood, I found space to contemplate what had happened. I replayed the experience in my mind constantly. Every night as I lay in bed, I would close my eyes and try to recapture the feeling of that place. The warmth, the connection, the sense of rightness that permeated everything. Sometimes I would catch just a wisp of it, like hearing a familiar melody played too softly to identify. I found myself drawn to books about near-death experiences, quantum physics, and consciousness. I, who had never been particularly spiritual despite playing in a church, began to consider questions I had dismissed before. What is consciousness? Does it end when the brain stops functioning, or could it be more like music, not contained in the instrument itself, but expressed through it? My piano teacher in college once told me that when we play music, we're not creating something new, but rather discovering something that already exists. The music is already there in the universe, she'd say. We're just finding it with our fingers. I began to wonder if consciousness might be similar. Not produced by our brains, but accessed through them. When I finally told someone, I realized there would never be words to describe what I actually experienced. I chose to confide in Sarah, another pianist who had become a close friend since my move to New York. We were having coffee after a rehearsal, and something about the quiet intimacy of the moment made me brave enough to try. I started hesitantly, watching her face for signs of disbelief or judgment. But as I spoke, the words began to flow more easily, and I found myself telling her everything: the lights, the tube, seeing Kip, the overwhelming sense of peace and connection. When I finished, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I believe you experienced something profound," she said, "but I don't think I can truly understand it because I wasn't there." Her reaction shut me down a bit. Not because she was dismissive, she wasn't, but because I realized that even the most sympathetic listener could never fully grasp what I had experienced. It was like trying to explain a concerto to someone who has never heard music. Remembering this after all of this time brings me to one conclusion. For whatever reason, I was allowed to see Kip entering the afterlife and how it affected him to the core. I could not see what he saw, but experienced it partially through him. I have changed many things about my own life because of the experience. My approach to music, for one, before the accident, I played with technical precision but often felt disconnected from the emotional heart of the pieces. Now, I try to play from that place of connection I experienced in the light. Music has become less about performance and more about communication, trying to express something of that ineffable experience through the press of keys and vibration of strings. I've also become more present in my relationships. Before, I was always focused on the next performance, the next achievement. Now I try to really see the people around me, to connect with them in a meaningful way. I remember how Kip looked at me with complete recognition and acceptance, and I try to bring some small measure of that to my interactions with others. Mostly, I remember the experience as a time that was no turning back for me. I am positive there is a place to be after we leave this world, a place that did feel more like a natural home than this world does. Most importantly, I learned that the source of it all is more than we can imagine or ever describe. Next week, I'll return to Carnegie Hall for the performance I never gave. The program has changed. Instead of the technically impressive but emotionally distant pieces I had originally selected, I'll be playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, and an original composition I've titled The Light Beyond. I don't expect everyone who hears it to understand the experience behind the music, but perhaps some will feel an echo of what I felt in that place, a resonance that suggests there is more to our existence than what we perceive in our daily lives. As pianists, we know that the most important part of music isn't the notes themselves, but the spaces between them, the brief silences that give shape and meaning to the sound. Perhaps life and death work the same way. Perhaps what I experienced wasn't an aberration or hallucination, but a glimpse of the greater composition in which we all play a part. I don't claim to have all the answers. There are still moments when doubt creeps in, when the rational part of my mind suggests explanations involving oxygen deprivation and neural misfiring. But then I remember Kip's face, the joy and peace I felt through him, and I know that whatever happened was real. Thanks for the opportunity to write this down somewhere safe. Perhaps by sharing my experience, others who have glimpsed that light might feel less alone, might find the courage to consider their own brushes with what lies beyond, and perhaps those who haven't might approach the mystery with a bit more openness, a bit more wonder. After all, as any musician knows, there's always more to the composition than what appears on the page.